Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Extra Time, the U.S. Men's National Team Soccer Podcast. I am Tim, and I'm running solo today. Couldn't get my brother, my friend Chris. They are all tied up with summer obligations. So it's just going to be me bringing it to you solo. In this episode, we're going to break down the USA-Jamaica match. We're going to talk about some of the up-and-coming players on the squad and the impacts that they made, as well as what the United States has to do going forward, and touch on all those things. All of that is coming up as we head into Extra Time. Let's get to it. So the United States coming off of a 1-1 draw with Jamaica. And at first glance, you're not really like super excited, right? Trinidad comes out, they win their match, so now they're top of the group. And you have to kind of step back for a second and put the goal of this entire Gold Cup into perspective. And when you focus on that goal, you get an idea of, you kind of reframe your mind around the purposes of this team and the purposes of the squad and all those other things. So obviously, yes, winning the Gold Cup is important and getting the trophy is important. But in order to establish where we are in CONCACAF and to be more solidified as a team in CONCACAF, to sit up at the top of CONCACAF and all that good stuff, the United States has to go to a place that it hasn't been able to go before, which is beyond just winning all of the tournaments. The United States, one, hasn't been a team that was able to consistently win all those tournaments, and two, hasn't been able to be a real-world powerhouse in the sense that once it took its A team off of the field, you still felt kind of an impact from them, and they still were able to do it. And the last Nations League and the last Gold Cup, we kind of saw that when we had some injuries, and McKinney couldn't make it, and Christian wasn't there, and we're playing semifinal games with an A.5 squad, B squad at times. And so this was an opportunity for us to really see significant depth. And as we break down the roster and as we really try to get into it and we look at the players that were part of this squad, we're seeing lots of 19 and 20-year-old players that most of the people, you haven't heard their names. Right? If you watch MLS soccer, you're aware of them. You know who they are. If you're following more closely, to some overseas stuff, you've heard of them. This is all mixed together with players who, in my opinion, probably no longer have a shot, with the exception of maybe that very last spot on the roster, if the roster expands at all, given the number of teams and games, or a really unfortunate string of injuries. You're not going to see players like Christian Roldan. You're not going to see players like DeAndre Yedlin. You're probably not going to see players like Aaron Long, right? These players are they're not going to be part of the squad. They're not going to make it in there. And so as we break down the starting 11 and we look at the roster, it's important to keep that framework in mind that U.S. Soccer, and now with Greg back at the helm, are trying to come up with a series of sets of players who are able to go the distance to not just be able to have a great performance in the next 4 years, not just have a great performance at the 2026 World Cup, but to be able to continue the legacy and say, no, this is the new foundation, right? USA Soccer kind of like the phoenix out of the ashes after that 2018 failure. So now we've wiped the slate clean. We have this young talent. We have this group of guys that are going for it. And the game plan now is, this is the new us, and this is where we want to be. And we're not going to let anything come in and try to screw that up. And so I'm really excited to see lots of young guys get their starts, get their opportunities. And to give a little bit of dialogue between what Chris and Ryan and I talked about during this game was we had conflicting opinions on how all in the U.S. went to that mentality. So we're going to bring in a bunch of extra guys. We're going to take a look at the things we have to take a look at. And when you go to check out this starting lineup, the starting lineup isn't all young guys and it's not all veterans. It's a little bit of a mix. And as the mix kind of unrolls, you're left wondering, are we going to see all the talent that we wanted to see? Right? It's not any different than we saw going back to previous Gold Cups and Nations Leagues, where we didn't want to just put all the young guys in because then you were worried you wouldn't be able to get a firm grasp of their talent because they wouldn't be surrounded by guys who were playing and everybody's kind of competing with one another. And so we had some differing opinions on that. Chris and I leaned a little bit more towards, I don't really need to see a DeAndre Yedlin on the field, though I thought his game was fine. I thought he played a fine game for them. I didn't need to see a Christian Roldan getting subbed in, although, again, Christian Roldan had a fine second half substitution. He came in, he generated some scoring opportunities. I didn't really care to see Matt Turner in that game, although that one probably would have bit me in the butt because Matt Turner makes this amazing penalty save and keeps us in the game and allows us to get that draw. To give us more opportunity to see like a Brandon Vasquez up front. I think Ferreira has seen it. I think we've moved past that, especially with the addition of Balogun and Pepe kind of stepping up. I understand why we see a Ferreira in the mix, because putting Ferreira in there is like, okay, buddy, you're the third man on the totem pole. This is your opportunity. And it really showed Vasquez on the bench, like, this is your chance, right? If you can come in the game and you can do something, you can knock somebody else off the totem pole. You can push them down and you can kind of earn your spot. You might not see a lot of playing time, but again, Pepe comes out of form, you get into form, Balogun gets hurt, Pepe gets right. So now you start to see these things building in. So as we looked at the roster overall, I didn't have too many qualms with it, given that, we didn't really recognize a lot of the players. So we had seen a DeAndre Yedlin before. We've seen an Aaron Long before. Matt Miazga has had his moments with us and kind of just been all over the place. Alan Sonora is a new face that we get the opportunity to really see. James Sands we've seen before. Ferreira we've seen before. Morris we've seen before. Jordan Morris was another one that I had projected to be in the starting lineup as we were kind of exchanging on the app. If you don't have the USA Soccer app and you don't get to build your own little rosters and share them with your friends, you should do that. That's not a shameless plug. It's just a fun thing to do, and it's way easier than trying to do it yourself or texting it out. Aiden Morris, Alex Ndejas, which I was really excited because he's not only is he a quality up-and-coming young player and an international kind of, conversion. I just like the dude. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. I think he plays dangerous balls. I think he creates opportunities and scoring chances for the rest of the players on the field, so I really liked him. And then John Tolkien on defense. And so as we kind of break these guys down and see what they offer, I want to just touch base quick on players that maybe people hadn't heard of or hadn't had a lot of opportunities. So Alan Sonora, he plays attacking midfield for Juarez in Liga MX, which I believe is the Mexican National League. So he's been playing down there. A younger player, 24 years old, out of New York, playing in the midfield. When I think about the U.S. midfield, and I think about the players that were playing in there, right? So he's playing alongside James Sands and Aiden Morris. The guys that they're trying to compete with are so solidified. The U.S. men's national team midfield has so much depth. I'm not even sure what these players could have shown me because I'm not even sure what I was looking for to be seen. I think the only position that's probably up in the air is the second string defensive midfielder, kind of the role that Kellen Acosta was playing when he needed to, which is one that we've seen Yunus Musa try to fill at times and to varying levels of success. I would say more positive than not. And so that's kind of the role that James Sands looked to play. I wasn't wildly impressed by anything that he did. I thought that they overall struggled to figure out how to develop and possess in the midfield. And to me, the way I would describe it, it felt like they were torn between the style of soccer that they knew the U.S. played, right, of the guys that they admire and their mentors and their idols in Christian, in Brendan Aronson, in MMA, right, in Luca De La Torre, like that kind of knock the ball around, possess the ball, control the midfield, and the kind of soccer that they felt comfortable playing, which was a little bit of knocking it around and some of this just let's knock the ball up the field and smash the ball up the field. So whether that was a confidence issue, whether that was a tactical issue, I'm not sure. That's just kind of the vibe that I got that was going on from them. And early on in the game, we saw a lot of panic. We did not see a lot of composure. I think we were probably 20-something minutes into the game, maybe a little bit further. That penalty kick gets called, and the three of us are in our group chat saying, like, this is a pretty poor performance, and you had a moment where you were almost thinking, this is biting us in the butt, not having the opportunity to have anybody coming in off the bench at all who had half of an idea what they were doing. Without the experience in the midfield to kind of sit there and control the game, you wound up asking yourself, was this a mistake? Or, have we created a situation where we now can't really pull anything up off the bench? Maybe we went too deep. Maybe we went too young. Maybe these guys really aren't going to have the opportunity to get anywhere. And we're not necessarily going to get outclassed, but we're going to get outcomposed, right? There was certainly a lot of effort and a lot of fire in the guys that were stepping on the field. But as we're trying to build and we're trying to possess, what we saw was the United States getting the ball into the midfield, kind of getting panicked, and then knocking the ball right back to the defensive third, and our defenders trying to knock the ball around, only to have a lot of pressure put on them by Jamaica, for the midfield to kind of get lost and wonder, where am I supposed to go? How are we supposed to get the ball out of here? And then a ball kind of half-heartedly gets shelled up the field, only to get won by Jamaica and come back the other way. The good news was, as far as like defensively goes, we didn't really have too many overwhelming blunders. Did we play great? No. And there was an argument to be said that, and I think it's a tough argument to make, that initial tackle is a red card. So, Jamaica gets that yellow card. I think it was low. I had the squad pulled up for their lineup. Yeah, it was low. I don't necessarily think it was an easy red card decision. I do see the argument for it. I think that there was merit in saying, that seemed pretty malicious. His studs are up pretty high. He's making no attempt to play the ball. Maybe VAR looks at it, maybe they don't. But either way, it's like a pretty easy yellow card. And then you just see from there like a blundering of chances for the United States defensively, from getting the ball cleared to making bad tackles. And to me, and by the end of the game, Chris and Ryan disagreed with me a little bit. Aiden Morris looked super lost. He was a player, to kind of give you a rundown. He's been playing for the Columbus Crew. A lot of these guys are actually somewhere out by me, either at Cincinnati, Columbus, playing up in Michigan, stuff like that. He's 21 years old, out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He just looked lost. He's not a big dude at all by any means. His profile says on here he's 134 pounds. That's not a big guy for any sport. And I understand soccer lets you get away with having, smaller dudes, but this stuff just isn't going to work. And we saw that. We saw him getting out-pressured. We saw him getting, beat to second balls. He was getting physically out-battled, like height, speed, you name it, it was happening to him. And on top of that, he was also then just panicked and not composed when he got the ball. And so as he's trying to find guys and move the ball around the field, he's rushing. It's a little bit sloppy. And you could just tell he had a lot of that, like those youthful errors, right? The lack of experience and the lack of exposure to a more elevated game, I think was shown across the board for a lot of these guys, right? You get some more experience. You're not throwing the tackle that you throw where you just kick him in the chest and you get a penalty kick, and now Matt Turner's got to come up huge. You're in more of a position where you're going to, like, can't win this ball. Let me get my body on the goal side of him. Let me see if I can deter him from making any kind of shots there. And so that was one of the players where if I had to say somebody who I was least impressed with, Aiden Morris was somebody who I was least impressed with. To put that on the flip side of those things, since I've kind of just torn our entire midfield apart and been insanely disappointed, because honestly, even Senora, like, I was really not wowed There were moments, I guess, where we saw some opportunities, but again, it just kind of looked like it was a very bland performance, right? It wasn't really good. It wasn't really bad. And to bring it back to the lens we're looking at it through, these players they need to prove that they can earn a spot or the potential to even fight for a spot over the next 4 years. Because if you're bringing in 19 and 20-year-old guys, there is still a plethora of 19 and 20-year-old American players playing overseas and in the MLS that are going to be getting chances and getting call-ups. You're not going to get that many opportunities to impress playing for the national team. Your only other option then is to impress overseas or impress for your club team. Greg hasn't always been the coach that favored you being in form for your club. We saw him favoring Ricardo Pepi and Jesus Ferreira when they were in form with their club, but we saw him not favoring Haji Wright when Haji Wright was in form. We saw him not favoring a John Brooks when John Brooks was in form. We saw him not favoring a Tim Ream when Tim Ream was in form. So there's a lot of factors going into it, and the player pool is just massive. So, trying to find some positives outside of the midfield performances. I thought that we had some defending that was halfway decent. And one of the reasons that I say that, and the reason that I go about with this specific player, is when you watched the men play, John Tolkien was a player they wanted to play the ball to. And I don't know anything about this guy, right? This is the first time I've seen him play anywhere. A 20-year-old playing for the New York Red Bulls. Never seen this guy play before. And for the entirety of the game when he was on the field, we wanted to attack up his side. Now, maybe that's because we're used to having a Dest and a Robinson out there, and that's just the tactics that we're going to play. But I think it was more than that. The guys on the field were very confident and very adamant about playing him the ball. They wanted him to play the ball. And for the most part, he didn't disappoint. I thought he put in a quality performance for a 20-year-old player in the MLS, given the circumstances to the game. He didn't feel out of place. He didn't look super panicked. Yes, we made mistakes. Yes, we had errors. Yes, we could have played better. All of those things. But the composure that he had with the ball and without the ball seemed like he was content. He was comfortable playing for the national team. This stage wasn't rattling him. His emotions weren't getting the best of him. He wasn't second-guessing himself. He wasn't, overthinking things. And he had some balls that weren't great, and he had some opportunities that were kind of miffed. But for the most part, he was a player who had, at least for me, earned, I'm going to keep you on my radar. As we go forward, maybe I don't give you, more starting spots, and I'm probably still not considering you over the top of anybody else. But we also know Joe Scally's earning that secondary spot with Serginho Dest. So we're looking for somebody out here on the left that can play when Robinson gets hurt. And Robinson has gotten hurt before. And him and Dest have both gotten injured. And Miles Robinson have gotten injured in pretty important times for the United States. And the biggest thing to think about when you look at the entirety of the World Cup, you either have the depth or you don't get injured. And depth more often is going to win it, especially with a larger field, especially with an additional knockout round. You're going to need all the players that you can get. And for me, John Tolkien was a player who I thought, yes, this guy definitely earned his spot. He has an opportunity to continue on and to be one of those, spots for us. I also thought that Jalen Neal was a player that has kind of earned the ability to see a little bit more playing time and to be considered more going into the future. I liked when he came in. I liked how he came in. I know that he's coming into a really weird position, and I believe, and at the time that he comes in, we're shifting to playing a 3-back system. So not only are you coming as a substitute, you're coming in and we're completely changing our entire defensive formation because we have to go forward. He exhibited the same traits that I saw in Tolkien, right? He's winning some balls in the air. Not totally dominating. I think there was a couple times where Mikel Antonio just torched the guys that we had. And that's to be expected. But for the most part, when you take a striker like Mikel Antonio and you look at the rest of the players, I think Demarion Gray was playing on that, always playing on the opposite side. But when you look at the defensive players that we have, these are a 19 and a 20-year-old dude matching up against, a top Premier League striker. He doesn't really do a whole lot. I would take that as a win, and I would think that that's something that we should all get behind as well. So to move into sort of the attacking area, right? So when we think about like what went right going forward, we make some substitutions. We bring on Brandon Vasquez. And now the United States is in a position where, oh, I typed that out. And now I got to move it because you can't see it. What a blunder. What a blunder. And it's massive. And it is massive. Okay, that's better. That is better. I don't think it's just desperation. I don't think it's just the fact that Jamaica is slowing down. We didn't necessarily start to see like the better of play by any means, but we started to see players get themselves in positions where if the opportunity came to them, they would score. There's not really, you don't need to say anything more about Vasquez's goal. That's just what it was. Brandon Vasquez came in the game. He puts this mentality on that he's a striker. He is putting himself in great positions, and he's just waiting for the opportunity to have the ball drop at his feet. Jesus Ferreira just plays the ball in the box. It's not a great ball. It's not a bad ball. These were things the United States had hesitated to do earlier in the game and had hesitated to do in the last qualifying cycle. There's nothing wrong with putting the ball in the box, and in the final third, if you're not at least trying to create scoring opportunities, you're not going to win games. Jesus Ferreira does a great job, gets himself into a position, beats a guy. He's got the opportunity to play the ball in the box. He plays the ball into the box, and lo and behold, what happens? A Jamaican player makes a mistake. And teams who win games capitalize on the other team's mistakes. And Brandon Vasquez, just simple stuff. The ball drops at his feet. He just hits it in the net. Doesn't second guess himself. Doesn't try to do anything other than hit the ball into the net. Not crushing it, not placing it, just put the ball in the net. And it's great. You know, he beats Blake. Blake's a fantastic goalie, right? He had given us trouble for the rest of the game. We put it in. It's late. And now all of a sudden the United States is putting on this energy like we might get a second one. We might be able to go on and get a second one. So for a Brandon Vasquez, I think he's a player who has jumped that spot, and I think he has put himself in contention for eclipsing Ferreira as our third potential striker, and he's somebody that I would like to see get more playing time. Going forward, like when we play St. Kitts, I'm not really sure what kind of a performance you're going to get that's going to necessarily like make too much of a difference outside of just like an absolute throttling, right? So if Brandon Vasquez starts and he gets a hat trick in the first half and he does it on, 4 or less goal scoring opportunities, he's somebody who I think could really earn, a step up there. Same with Ferreira. If Ferreira starts and he gets 2 goal scoring opportunities and he scores both of them and they're both early on in the game in the first half, that's what we want to see. It's, we want to be able to step up as a team with superior quality who plays teams of not just inferior quality, but significantly inferior quality. And we've struggled with that. We've had our losses to the Panamas and the Trinidad and Tobagos and the Grenadines. We've had these really bizarre moments where the United States has failed to put any kind of a decent performance in against a team that, this is the World Cup for them. There's a lot of teams in the CONCACAF nations that this is their World Cup. They're not going to make the World Cup. They dream to make the World Cup one day. So those are things that I'm thinking, have to come out and we have to see. If I was going to break down the way that we looked at it before and say, okay, if I had to think about the United States, who would I make my 3 stars? So, and I say that in not just 3 stars as 3 stars of the game, but to also think more about going forward, who are the players that I thought earned the ability to start to fill that box of contention, right? So if the United States, here's how my brain looks at it. We have the 26 guys that we played in the World Cup. We've removed the guys that we know are not going to be part of the next cycle. So that's leaving us with X amount of players. And now we have to start to fill this like second boat, this second grid of players. And all of those players are going to slowly kind of compete and shift and sort themselves into some kind of hierarchy where the top echelon of them is going to move into the World Cup roster. So initially, right now in the Gold Cup, who are the players that I think are entering that grid? and who have certainly checked the box to say you have the right to play for one of those starting positions. I think John Tolkien has earned that spot. He was a player who he played a solid enough game. It's not like he was forced to defend against a nobody and he just had a great performance. He had, maybe a 6 out of 10 performance, a 7 out of 10 performance against a pretty decent striker in Mikel Antonio. So I would be taking him. I thought that Zendejas, even though he's probably somebody arguably that is already in that boat for contention, given games that we've seen him before, he was another player who every time he got the ball, he looked composed. He looked like he was trying to create dangerous opportunities. He did create dangerous opportunities. And so he's somebody that I want to see staying in contention. I thought Brandon Vasquez put himself in a situation just because he scored the goal. And yes, that might be like a really cheap way out. And I know that we got fans at home that really want to try to judge the performance and are less concerned with goals and points and all that stuff. You're a striker. That's what you get judged on. It's plain and simple. It's just at the end of the day, that's the only fact. And if you're coming in with that much limited playing time in a position where your coach is changing your team's formation, you're not taking out the other striker. You're going for it so that your team can try to put some points on the board. That's your only job, and that's what he does. The ball drops to his feet. He makes no hesitation. He puts the ball in the back of the net and just absolutely crushes it. I also think that Mihailovic is another player that earned that for me. He comes on as a sub. The midfield starts to get life. He's very direct with the ball. He's very confident with the ball. We start to create lots of opportunities. And for as much as the commentators praised Roldan for doing that, I really didn't think Roldan did anything other than just not be as fast as some of the other players, which certainly is beneficial. It's not a backhanded compliment. It's not an insult. It's one of the things I had to learn as a player. Sometimes zooming all over the place like a Brendan Aronson actually makes you worse. You might have to play slower to play faster. And I think that Christian Roldan kind of brought that to the team as he came on, and we started to see a lot more midfield development with players in positions that they needed to be in. I wasn't impressed with Cade Cowell in the Under-20 World Cup. I wasn't impressed with him in this game. I know that he's going to get a lot of media hype, and I know that that could change because maybe he could put it on. When I watch him play, I just don't get the vibe that he has what it takes to make the next level. I think he's going to be a great player for some Nations League group stage games. I think he's going to be a great player for the Gold Cup. I think he'll be a phenomenal MLS player. I don't think that he's going to have what it takes to make the next step. I just feel like there's a piece missing, especially looking at, and I guess this is the hardest part about trying to make these decisions with the squad, is your national team had players that could have played in the U20 World Cup. You have players, where your average age is 23. So if you sit in a game like this when you're looking at 19 to 21-year-old players and you're saying, do I think you have a shot? You're not even looking at to see if they have a shot in 4 years. You're looking to see, do they have a shot in 6 years, in 8 years? Because they're essentially in the same cycle and the same age bracket. They're going to age out of the World Cups at the same time Pulisic ages out of the World Cup. At the same time Aronson ages out of the World Cup. At the same time Adams ages out of the World Cup. That's a tall ask for a lot of these players that are coming into it. So did I think that, Aiden Morris, you're going to have to show me more than that if I think you're going to be competing in this spot with these guys, right? Alan Senor, he's 24. Like, you already did it? No. Matt Miazga, somebody who'd kind of been around. You start your career at Chelsea. You're back in the MLS with FC Cincy. You're, coming out today and saying you felt like you got screwed by Greg Berhalter because you weren't part of the cycle. You didn't really put on any kind of a performance. And I know that like we're playing Jamaica, but you got to think, Aaron Long was part of World Cup qualifying. DeAndre Yedlin was part of World Cup qualifying, and you're making the argument that you're going to be part of World Cup qualifying. How is Jamaica scoring a goal and getting a penalty kick? I understand the penalty kick's Aiden Morris's fault. Maybe there's not a lot you can do there, but you're taking on the role of a Walker Zimmerman. If you feel like you got screwed and you have a spot on this team, you got to earn it. And I just didn't see that performance from him on the field. I didn't. So, as far as stars go, those are the players that, to me, I would be bringing on. Players that I wish I had seen on the field. I wish that Gaga Slonina had played because, again, I just think Sean Johnson's a player that we're just not going to need. Right, unless, again, it's as a third. But I just really think that, Matt Turner and Slonina are going to be the players that we have solidified. There are other goalies. I believe we'll be pulling them in, and we'll get to see them. 4 years is a long time. and injuries will be a thing. So I don't see Sean Johnson being part of this discussion and part of the conversation. I just kind of see us going in the direction that we're going. So the United States is going to play St. Kitts and Nevis tomorrow. I appreciate you guys tuning into this podcast. I know it was strange. It's very weird. It's very different. It's tough being by myself because I'm used to bouncing questions and ideas off people. So I'm just kind of shooting from the hip with a couple talking points. But we're going to see. I'm excited to see what the United States can do. Let's just put some points on the board, and then we get to play Trinidad. Trinidad is going to be tough because Trinidad is most likely going to be in a position where if they can get points against us, they guarantee themselves the top of the group. So, 6 points from here on out is going to be no questions. It's going to be what we have to do. And I believe the United States can do it, so we'll see what kind of a performance we get to put on and the kind of players that we put on. Leave a comment below. Let us know the top 3 players that you thought. Let me know if you completely disagree with anything. I think the most important part in these conversations is getting people with differing opinions. I want to know what you disagree with. I want to hear about it and have some fun conversations with you. We appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will catch you Thursday or Friday after the St. Kitts game.